Hi, I'm Lee Evslin. I'm a physician. I've lived on the island of Kauai for 34 years. In addition, I'm a board-certified pediatrician. I am extremely interested in wellness, and under the banner of this came this whole issue of pesticide exposure and its effect on health. So I have become particularly interested in the subject. The American Academy of Pediatrics put together quite a technical report with 200 references, and they specifically were saying that the Academy was becoming alarmed, that the data was becoming increasingly powerful, suggesting that unborn children and infants and growing children were particularly susceptible to pesticides. They were saying, one, we need to recognize that these pesticides are harmful to the unborn infant, the growing child, and so on. Two, that we're just beginning to understand the potential damaging effect, which include cancers and neurodevelopmental problems and endocrine problems and behavioral issues and chronic disease issues, that much more research is needed on the subject, but that we already know enough to be alarmed. It's not a normal practice for a pediatrician to say, and how many pesticides do you spray around your house, and do you live near fields that are sprayed? It hasn't really been in our thinking process. Not that it shouldn't have been, but it just hasn't been. And that was the concern and the conclusion of this body, that the average pediatrician was not spending any time, or at least enough time, on the subject, nor was the average pediatrician knowledgeable enough about the subject, and that the data was growing, that this is something we should be paying a lot of attention to. And they do mention in there that they are particularly concerned about agricultural workers and the effect on the children of agricultural workers from bringing the pesticides home on their clothing and on their bodies. So they are saying that this is not just a home environment, but they're saying let's not forget the home environment, because the home environment can get a surprising amount of pesticides in. And we don't really think about it. I had a 4-month-old who came into our office with a cold who stopped breathing. And the story they told was that they had sprayed the house aggressively with pesticides. This is the way we need to start thinking. We got to start thinking this stuff that we took for granted is probably a lot more dangerous than we ever gave it credit for. And I have heard from the physicians on the east side that their impression is that they're seeing more aggressive cancers at younger ages and being picked up at later stages from the west side. But it's their impression. And I think the important thing about impressions is that's what drives scientific research, but it's not the final conclusion of final scientific research. You take something like that, which would be called an anecdote, and put them together and say, let's get real data. So at the least, this should drive us, this perception among the physicians that they're seeing more of this type of illness on the west side should drive us to properly collect the data. We need to know by zip code the cancer rates. We need to know by zip code the other types of diagnoses that they're thinking about, which is asthma and neurodevelopmental problems and even bloody noses. This is a problem we're all facing, and it's for the blue shirts and the red shirts. We're dealing with a very dangerous situation, and we need to work on this together. If the data is what it's suggesting, we need to do things even quicker. And all of us would be crazy, in my mind, not to support that. This is health issues that affect us all dramatically. I know a lot of people that smoked and never got lung cancer, and I could easily say, you know, there's no evidence. And that's what actually happened, is when it first came out that smoking was dangerous, the companies certainly denied it, and people that were smokers denied it. Once we began to realize and look closer, we realized, oh my God, of course smoking is really bad for you. And it seems hard to believe right now, but we didn't. There was a time period when people just plain denied it because everybody they knew was fine. We don't know why one person responds and then another, and we also know that it takes large groups of data to find out these things. But when they started to collect the data, it was unmistakable, the damaging effect of smoking. And I am positive we're going to find the same thing with these pesticides, because they're already finding the data. And the data seems as if you can't oppose it. The data is real. And it's only going to get stronger and stronger, not weaker and weaker. And it makes all the sense in the world. These are substances that are toxic. That's why they're used. And how they wouldn't affect us is we're being much too casual thinking that they might not. and it's very possible that the inactive ingredients are playing a very big role in this too, and that one of their comments is that we need to change the labeling laws. We need to know everything that's in there, and the dust seems pretty dramatic. And you know the dust is laden, and and as some of the testifiers talked about, that dust goes into waterways, and the waterways come out in pretty small areas. And what's really interesting was a hearing they had on the small boat harbor recently. So the silt comes out the irrigation ditch into the small boat harbor, and one of the questions was, well, if the small boat harbor is filling up with silt, why not move the irrigation ditch 10 feet over so it could go into the ocean? And the response was, this is pesticide-laden stuff, and you can't do it straight into the ocean. It has to go into a holding area. So the small boat harbor has become a legal holding area, which seems truly amazing to me. Which isn't funny, but it is. Somehow we're accepting it going in the small boat harbor, but we're not accepting it going downstream. That doesn't make sense to me. This is my opinion, not necessarily scientific opinion, but that it would be interesting to sample parts of the island's urine metabolites of these. And so if we had a cluster of cancer cases and they were showing these higher levels, and we had communities that were showing these higher levels and other communities that had lesser statistics in this direction and they were showing lower levels, that's just gathering evidence. What we actually do with that evidence, I'm not clear, but I personally think it would be important evidence. I think, though, that it's extremely important that the council not take the route of let's collect the data before we do anything. The American Academy of Pediatrics has collected the data. They are saying very clearly this is a problem. We don't need to recollect the data to do certain simple things on Kaua'i, which is create the buffers around the schools and this right to know as a starter, and buffers around schools and playing areas we're talking about, and other public gathering areas, and the right to know. I would think it a terrific shame if the council took the easier route of saying, let's do an island-wide study and then decide what to do. If we really find these things are toxic and they're in our soil forever, what does that do to anybody wanting to live on the west side? And I do think that that's a real issue that needs to be thought about. I don't know enough to really comment on it, but it would worry me, for sure. I mean, I don't think the answer is to abandon Kaua'i. I think it's make Kaua'i safe.